Welcome back to the Beyond Cloud series of Discovery Discussions presented by Intelligent HQ and hosted in London by Groupe INSEEC. Today we're meeting with Jim Darragh, CEO of Abiquo. We're here today with Jim Darragh, CEO of Abiquo, a cloud orchestration company. Jim, I'd like to hear a little bit more about exactly what cloud orchestration means and a little bit more about what Abiquo is doing in this business, as well as maybe a bit of a view on the risks and opportunities that you see.
Sure. So at Abiquo, we're a software company and we provide tooling that enables organizations to actually go and build clouds and deliver them either within their own infrastructure, on part of their own infrastructure, or for service providers to actually develop their cloud offerings using our software. So we've really become an enabling technology for a lot of companies to actually go and take that infrastructure and deliver it back to organizations. So we've been doing it for quite some time. You know, the company was founded in 2006, by birth a Spanish company, but we've been growing and growing and expanding our global presence ever since that point. In terms of opportunities and risk, it's a really interesting question, right? We're at the kind of tipping point of which technologies emerge at that point. There is no clear leader at this point. You know, there's some pretty large organizations who've built themselves products or acquired companies that allowed them to create, like functionality to what we do. We were a purpose-built tool in the first place. We were developed and grown to do what we do now.
Well, you've been around quite a bit longer than a lot of people that are using the cloud label, so that kind of a bit of a pedigree tends to give a little bit of credibility as well.
Absolutely, and when I look at the size of the product and how many lines of code are in it, you see quite how much effort's gone into it. But in terms of that opportunity, well, we want to be that emerging technology. Is cloud going to be the next trend that actually we see companies emerge to significant scale? Is it the one where, or is it the one where large companies already who are in adjacent technologies will acquire or build features and functions that allow them to capture the space as well? It's still, in the thousands of customers, not tens of thousands of customers who've actually deployed technologies like ours right now. So it remains to be seen, which one will win through. And that's the risk and the opportunity in the same breath, I guess.
Well, I've been likening the VHS beta argument around cloud a lot lately for a couple of different reasons, because you had VHS as a winner for different reasons, not because it was technically better, but because it was marketed differently. And we can take a look at Apple and Android and we see a little bit of that happening as well. I think we've got the opportunity in the cloud space for any of the above to happen, right? The small specialists can still survive and the people with the better technology will get picked up and will get absorbed. Are you looking at finding the best of breed to put into your product, or are you looking at delivering a product purely from the ground up, or is it a kind of a hybrid that you have?
We very much look at, how can we add components, features that the market requires to really make this technology sing. So we're all about building. We are a heavily engineering focused organization in terms of what we add to the product, how we listen to customers, what they need, how they want to transition from where they are today to a more flexible future. So, we're very much about, continually pushing the envelope in terms of what we build and what we deliver to our customers.
One point that you made that's pretty interesting is how large corporations and small corporations don't exactly quite know what they're doing. They're all trying and they're all working in different directions, and I think the larger companies can afford this a little bit more, and the smaller companies are taking a little bit more risk perhaps in getting into that space. But if this is the next big thing, why is it different than the last big thing? Are we still spending a bunch of money to repeat what we've done in the past, or are we actually going to have cloud as something that's going to help to correct some of, frankly, the way that we've been doing things wrong in the past?
Every organization I talk to has a slightly different take on what they're trying to achieve and how they're going to achieve it, right? A lot of that depends upon what's gone before, actually. It depends on what they've built to date, what standards, processes, procedures, even people, and politics, all those P's they have in-house. And that often gears their thinking about what they think is achievable for the future. And then you've got a raft of organisations, we being one of them, who come from the other angle, which is, here's how you might achieve that. Here's what we think is possible. Here's the way, you can write a new future for yourself. And really the glue between the two, how does an organisation transition from where they are today with all of those P's, politics, people, process, all of those things that exist in-house today. How do they transition to that future environment where they can actually really reap benefit? I think we're all kind of at the point where we're agreed, even people, like the European Commission are agreed that there's a great opportunity both for organisations, even as far as countries, GDP, to benefit from the advantages of the cloud. So everyone's looking at that, finished article, the end goal, and saying, okay, so we do want to get there. The difference between that and where they are today and the transitionary route between the two is a key question. It really is. How do they get there? What can people offer? And very many people have, similar objectives of achieving these things, but different ways of getting there. And I think that is something that's really the emerging element of this.
I think the critical word in what you've been saying is transition, actually, because it's not so much transformation and it's not just a jump and a move. You need to plan where you're going. You need to plan that along with where you've been and what you've already spent your money in.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I quite like about products like yours in the orchestration space is that it allows IT departments to start saying yes a little bit differently because of the no's being from a defensive position, I think we get sometimes. And it also allows other businesses to start to look at how they can control and integrate a view, if not the systems themselves. That, to me, seems to be what cloud orchestration is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's another interesting kind of angle we can introduce at that point, which, and you've already mentioned it, which is kind of where companies are in their evolutionary cycle. If you're a small company today and you want to take advantage of the cloud, it's relatively easy. It's relatively painless. You don't have all that legacy, you don't have the transition to go through. You can almost go straight to cloud, first stop. The larger organizations, the enterprises, even the managed service providers that we talk to, have to deal with that transition. They know they have to reap the competitor advantage of cloud, and they have to get there, relatively quickly.
If the competitive advantage actually doesn't cancel the other money that they've been saving with something that they're replacing, I'm finding this to be a real stumbling block.
Yeah, you're exactly right. How do you take the best of what you've got and move that into an even better place, which incorporates the cloud? And we've worked really hard at understanding what that is. We've worked really hard at saying, okay, so you do want to take advantage of public cloud. You do want to take advantage of your users being able to self-provision. You do want to take advantage of these things. You do want to share more infrastructure, virtualize more. All of these elements make up elements of what they can call cloud. But how do they bring their current position over there? And how do they transition some of the tools they've invested in, all those processes around, workflow or backup or recovery, all of these different things that they've invested heavily in? How do they port those over? So we spent an awful lot of time not just ploughing forward and forward and forward with visions of how the cloud can be, bigger, brighter, shinier, but actually how can you move to that cloud? How can you take the things that you feel dear about, the things that you have invested heavily in, how do you bring them over into that cloud environment at the same time? So it's very, very key. It's very, very complex. It is quite time consuming. It does delay, the transitionary process. And we're here to try and help handhold people through that.
I'm really pleased to hear a cloud provider actually not saying everything needs to go in the cloud today. It's a lot more intelligent answer. It really suits the business's requirements a little bit better.
Don't get me wrong. We have been there. And part of listening to the customer has meant we had to kind of draw back. Because painting a rosy future about, go and build your cloud now. Forget all that other stuff. You don't want that. It will slow you down. It will delay things. Go and build your cloud now. I think that's where a lot of people were 12 months ago. And we were out there pushing that story. We had to really sit down and listen to the customer, and they were saying, well, yeah, it looks great. We can see that. It looks like a really bright future for everyone involved. No way of getting there. Right? There is a big chasm between that and where we are, and we can't see the route. Can you help us plan, deliver that route where we can actually transition the good things about what we've built, all the benefits we've reaped in the past. How do we get over to that future vision?
Nice progressive viewpoint. I think a lot of people in the market are starting to catch on to the fact that you're not selling a product. They know they're selling a service, they know they're selling solutions, they know they're selling relationships, and they all want to become trusted advisors, but they're still trying to do the actual mechanics of selling in the old-fashioned way, and I think the progression is really quite interesting. The other point that you made about the European Commission moves us into our third question, where we're talking about standards and regulation. Now, those are two very different words, of course. I'm up for standards because it allows people to have a little bit more of a level playing field, or at least know if they are on or off or inside the lines. Regulations, I'm a little bit more concerned about, because along with everybody getting excited about cloud, everybody wants to have their fingers on cloud, and I think they should regulate what's in the cloud, not the cloud itself. From a company that manages these platforms for different businesses and helps other people to actually integrate their own products, how do you see this?
So I'm not for regulation. I can come out with that statement. I think I can make that now, because I think it will stifle innovation.
You're not unique so far in the series.
Right. And I think it will just erect barriers, right? And I spoke to an analyst some time ago, and she'd done a count of regulation that was already out there, probably some of it cutting over, regulation that was already there and all this kind of stuff. And she was into the hundreds, and nobody knows the whole remit and gambit of what they are, and is anyone paying huge attention to that? I'm not sure about particular regulation. But I am for standards, so I'm with you on that. And when we talk about standards, we're talking about, the more important issues here. Is your data retrievable, from in the same form that you sent it to potentially a third-party cloud type organization? We've seen that come to bear, right? We have seen organizations who were, hosting people's data who are no longer, and suddenly, there was a bill put in front of the customers saying, well, if you want your data back, you better pay. And we don't want that. Right, I do see room for standards around where data is stored and the visibility of where data is stored. I do see standards maybe around units. How do you compare all of the different pricing options, all of the different permutations that you could get on an even playing field, so that you as a customer know what you're getting. Is it secure? Where is it stored? And does it comply more what we were talking about with the corporate regulation of an organization, not necessarily imposed by a government or an independent body, but just the operating policy of that organization.
So some kind of a standards in what people are talking about, so that we can understand, like a little badge from the government that says this is real. Now, I don't want to get into badges from the government, but comparisons between products, it's like an Argos catalog with the complexity of a mobile phone offering.
So there was, in the press this week, right, the UK, I think it was the UK Food Agency or UK government is trying to encourage supermarkets to clearly state, what different nutritional value, and give it some kind of colour chart, of what you're buying. And 60% of food manufacturers are saying yes, and clearly there are 40% who are saying, well, I'm not sure you want to know what I'm serving up on this meal.
That's a good analogy, actually.
Well, I think that might be useful, right? Is it highly secure? Is it a very cost-effective method for me? What am I getting?
Secure is a really good one, because secure is really in the eye of the beholder, and what your requirements are. The security needs of an NHS trust versus a plumbing chain are significantly different. But if the cloud badge says secure, buyer beware is one thing. When they're talking about public data and regulatory things, it's no longer buyer beware. It's actually the provider needs to be responsible to give the right answer. Is that happening?
I don't think it's as transparent as it could be by any stretch of the imagination, right? The market is at that hyper-competitive, very fast growth stage, and people, organizations are providing clearly very different services, which could have, in the security context, very different levels of security, could be in very different places. It could be 3 servers and a guy in a room, or it could be, an underground secure bunker with, thousands of servers in it. Do you know what you're getting? And I think we need to be, a bit more transparent than that, because you and I know, this is a web industry. right? So it's very easy to sell some kind of service on the web, but are customers getting, the level of service, security, peace of mind, price that they actually think they're signing up to?
I wrote in a blog earlier this year how it's kind of the poof model. Like, click here, fill in this, touch that, give a credit card number, and poof, you're in the cloud. It all depends on what cloud you want to be in and how much you want to be doing there, and are the prices going to be the same later as they are now? A lot of it comes down to reputation of the people, but a lot of it comes down to trial and error. Yeah. So I think there's more and more information, but there's a lot more disinformation to confuse the issues for a lot of people. So I'm definitely going to agree with you that I like the idea of some kind of a label, some kind of a grade that allows people to have a industry perspective on what it is. And if everybody doesn't sign up, then I, the consumer, can choose who I want to trust and who I want to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we should never take power away from the consumer. Plus the fact the consumer has different requirements for different applications, workloads, data sets, whatever it may be. And they may choose to put things in different places. That's the kind of freedom of choice we want, right? But in the knowledge, you know what you're getting when you do sign up on the dotted line.
Well, that brings us up to our last question, and my premise is that the cloud is really a delivery vehicle. It's that which gets us there. I've had chats with some cloud providers likening them to the plumbing and electricity in a house, because I'm trying to argue with them that the customers aren't asking them to pick the colors on the walls or the art. They want to have this infrastructure working and delivering and reliable. And when we're talking about it as a utility model, that's what people are expecting. Your electricity is always on when you want it. Now, we're not quite there yet, but I'm wondering where you think cloud might be going. Where else might it be taking us to? Because to me, the prizes at the end of the road are things like big data and the other aspects where companies and governments can start to extract value out of all of these things we've been doing over these years. Cloud gets us there. Is that going to change?
I think we've got a long way to go still, right? I mean, you could start by discussing, the utility billing model. Are we really there? Some places, right? Some places you can pay for what you use. You can pull in, you can pull out. I don't think we quite have that full flexibility. People still ask for longer term contracts. I guess, that is somewhat similar to the utilities. It's not so easy to disengage with your electricity provider as you might think. So there's elements like that where, again, I think we know what the end goal is. We know what the vision looks like, and people are getting there at different speeds. I think from a business point of view, enterprises, even SMBs, they're moving their infrastructure. They're slowly no longer owning that piece. They're ceding it to people who do own it. They're ceding it to organizations where, that's now their business. Their business is to own the infrastructure, and your business is now to rent it and deliver.
But that's kind of how we've been living for the last 10, 15 years with outsourced data centers in this space, right? So we're moving to a slightly different model where it's a little more quick to start and stop. But is it really so different?
Well, I think you're right in your premise that you're no longer picking the color, right? You're just picking the quality of service that you get, and I think that is a step change, right? You don't have to worry about what it's running on. You have to worry about the service that you get back from the organisation that you engage with. So I think that for an IT organisation is quite a leap, right? They're going from walking around the building with screwdrivers and making sure everything's functioning and putting new racks in and so on, to managing service levels and application guarantees from organizations where they're either buying an application, the kind of Salesforce.com model, or they're buying an infrastructure to run their own applications. And I think that's quite significantly different. At the same time, of course, you've got the other things going on in that organization, and maybe that frees them up to think about how they utilize mobile devices, how they use social media. I got to be honest, I didn't see social media as a business tool until 3 or 4 years ago, when suddenly organizations started to gather the fact that this isn't an employee abusing his time by being on Facebook or LinkedIn or something.
Not always.
Yeah. But now it's actually it's another mechanism to reach customers, to engage with the outside world. And it's become a valid business option for these organisations. So you've got those three things coming together at once. And actually, I think the cloud element of it frees people up to do more business-facing activity within the IT organisation.
That's actually one of the arguments that we had to try to sell customers on the outsourcing model over the years, the fact that we're going to take care of things that aren't your core skills, your core competence, and allow you to focus on what you do. Some of them that worked, some of them it didn't, and I mean the whole model, and we're really just an evolution of that now. I see a company like Abiquo and the orchestration products that you have as an answer for a lot of organizations, as an interim bridge. But I'm going to ask you a tough question. Do you see orchestration as something that is going to be inbuilt into the other offerings and that the life cycle of a company like yours is finite? Or do you believe that the complexity of the market and the industry is that there's going to be a longer term need?
So we are that management layer, right? And there is always going to be the need for management, because as this evolves more and more, and as we've talked, you could see organizations placing different types of data or different types of workload into many different places, keeping some in-house, pushing off to people with very secure service levels or not so secure for different kind of aspects of their application. That's a management overhead at that point. And we are, a technology that allows people to reduce that management overhead as well and manage their hybrid environment, the mixture of what they have in-house versus what they're willing to put out into, a third-party organization from a compute perspective. So, to do that and to manage it all while you're doing it and ensuring that everything is functional, controlled, governed, at the same time, it could be quite a heavy management overhead. So we really work with organisations to make sure that they can manage that transition, that they can put things in the right places, that they're getting the right service levels back from those organisations. So I don't think the cloud management platform, the orchestration layer, is a short-term option at all. I think it is something that's there for the long term and really helps them actually to deliver on the promises that they're trying to deliver on.
I think I'm going to agree with you on that. And I think if we were talking about products in the sourcing and hosting space 5 or 10 years ago, I might not have that same agreement. Today, the difference is that the playing field is changing so constantly, so many new players coming in, the technology is again evolving, and we've got this phenomenal position of everything kind of coming together and all of the technology raising the capabilities and the awareness. So yeah, I agree as well that there is going to be a long-term mix.
I mean, part of the key, to interrupt there, but part of the key here is to avoid lock-in at any point, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
You need to be able to move around. And that's maybe move technologies, it's maybe moving providers, it's all of those things. Now, going back slightly to that outsource piece, I was there when this was happening. I was probably selling technology to the outsourcers and thinking what a great opportunity for me this was. Because there were 7-year deals, there were 9-year deals, there were 10-year deals worth multi-million dollars.
And lots of lock-in.
Locked in to the extreme, right? You were going nowhere. You were signing long-term agreements with organizations to deliver that outsourcing agreement. Now you have ultimate flexibility. You should be able to move workloads in and out of providers.
So this is actually one of the critical elements that I look at end user companies asking when they're going to cloud, and I look at cloud companies trying to answer for their customers who aren't asking it, and that is, how do I get my data out? How do I end this relationship? How do I know that that's nice and safe and simple? Now we know that was really complicated in the past. Does a tool like Abiquo in your platform actually help to ensure that people aren't locked in?
Well, I mean, that's been one of our core premises all along. We built the technology on the basis that it would work with the broadest possible range of underlying infrastructure if you were building something in-house. And we've just taken that forward. And try and work with a broader and broader increasing set of service providers as well to ensure that you can, you have mobility of application in and out of the service provider. And I think that's a key component, right? That's what we're talking about here. Don't lock yourself to a particular technology if you're buying technology still, or don't lock yourself to a particular service provider if you want the flexibility to, be billed for what you use, to get data in and out and put it in a different place if there's a different option that you want to consider. If you're not getting the service level that you should have researched quite heavily when you went into that contract, but suddenly you find something you're not happy with and you want to take it out and put it into a different place. That flexibility without a huge overhead we try and enable that element of it.
You just made me think of the difference between buying a car, renting a car, leasing a car, and today's model of a zip car. Cloud today is actually the zip car part of the analogy, whereas the other three, while they're flexible and different, they all have similar commercial models and similar tie-ins and complexities. If you might lease, but it's not like you can get a new car every time you want something different. Cloud is starting to give people that opportunity, as long as the companies that are tying them in are thinking about in the mentality that you've just been describing. I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Jim. It's been a very interesting conversation, hearing a little bit more about Abiquo and having the cloud orchestrator in the studio. Thanks for your time.